I'm just making note of the coffee cup down here to make sure I don't. Whoa, I mean, my maternal grandmother, Amy Castle, whenever she was upset with someone or exasperated by someone, she would say, "They make me tired." That was about the strongest language I ever heard my grandmother use. "They make me tired." I just thought she was old and tired a lot. Oh, she knew the words. I know what family she grew up in, but she chose not to use them. She chose to just say, "They make me tired. They make me tired." But you know what makes me tired? Turning on the TV and hearing all of the anger and the hatred and the vitriol with which we are attacking each other in this country, day in and day out. The Democrats this, the Republicans that. I am getting so tired of it. I turn on my cell phone just to get the daily update on the news, and it's more of the same. And I know this goes out on the radio, but truth be told, I'm even tired of church conferences where we come together and we do the same thing. We tear each other apart. I'm getting tired of it. I really am just very tired. There was a TV series, TV program, Harold mentioned it to me, and I saw it advertised a time or two on TV. I really wanted to watch it, but it never seemed to be on TV at the same time that I could be watching TV. I did catch a part of it. It was on human aggression. And that particular segment was on human tribalism. And it was a fascinating segment about how tribalism was actually very important in our prehistory. In the early makings of humanity, tribalism, the ability to form a group, to form it quickly, and to make those bonds very strong, was extremely important to survival. They were competing for the necessities of life, competing for a safe place to lodge, a cave or whatever, competing for food, for game, for berries, for water, and the necessity of forming groups and forming bands together to protect what you have and to keep you safe was necessity for the survival. Tribalism was part of who we are, and it kept us alive. The problem is we've carried that thinking with us into the modern age. And the example that they kept coming back to was sports, especially soccer. And I think because it was being shown in America, they showed a lot of European soccer matches. And I can remember as a kid getting together with my friends and kind of laughing at those silly Europeans. They were punching each other over a soccer game. Of course, we just kind of laughed and said that was the most exciting part of the game. Soccer is, yeah, 3 hours is still 0-0. But anyway, I'm glad you can laugh. But the fans would stampede each other. It wasn't just the players out there killing each other. It was the fans literally attacking. And they kept coming back to pictures of that. And we laugh. But when I think about some of our high school football games, in the 1970s and 80s. Small town, western Nebraska. We're supposed to be kind, gentle folk, commonsensical, logical. We go to church, mild-mannered. But every Friday afternoon we file into the football field, the stadium, and we take our stands. And these wonderful, kind, gentle, God-fearing, church-going mothers as well as fathers, standing on the sidelines, yelling at their children, "Kill 'em!" I'm glad you can laugh. I'm glad you can laugh. Have we changed much since the 70s and 80s? My family and I have been here in Junction City for 3, going on 4 months. A very short time. Now, I did not go to the Manhattan Junction City football game. Wendy didn't go either. Jacob didn't go. David did go. And it was a day or two after the Junction City Manhattan football game. We were in the car going somewhere, I can't remember where. And I think it was David who spoke up in the back seat. "Do you know what the Manhattan people did to our players at the football game?" They were using racial slurs against our football players. And you could hear the anger. I mean, we've been here 3 months. How quickly our tribal instincts work. Yes, Dave?
It was toward the cheerleaders, not the players.
Oh, it was towards the cheerleaders. Same point. And my comment, I think, was something to the effect of, well, that's probably not the best way to go about doing things. And he was like, "Oh, yes, those rich, white," what was it? Privileged Manhattan people. How quickly and how strongly we form these bonds and ties of tribalism. And some of that is school spirit and then protecting, you support your team. And some of that is good too. But 3 months, very quick, you could feel the anger rising from the back seat. My comment to him was, well, maybe that's not the best attitude either. But I think you get the point. Today is actually Reformation Sunday. For those of you who are struggling to figure out what I'm talking about, Reformation is the Protestant Reformation 500 or so years ago. Martin Luther taking his 95 Theses, nailing them to the church doors, protesting what was going on in the Catholic Church at the time. It was the beginning of the Protestant movement. I sometimes wonder if Martin Luther ever regretted what he did. Or if he had known what was going to happen on down the road, if he would have done it differently. Because within 100 years of Martin Luther nailing those theses to the door, Europe was embroiled in something called the 30 Years' War. 8 million people dead, either directly or indirectly, from fighting over religious differences. Either killed in battle or killed because of hunger, starvation, sickness, and disease. 8 million dead. Now, God brought good things out of the Reformation. God is able, God is capable, and God is good, and God does bring good things out of anything and everything. And I do believe the Reformation did a lot of good. But my question for you this morning is, do we always have to revert back to our basic tribalistic instincts? Do we always have to go back and hate and use the anger and the words of vitriol that we expel at one another just because we disagree? Is it really necessary? I think Jesus' answer was no. We definitely do not have to revert back to our tribalistic instincts. There is a better way. Think about the week before Jesus was hung on the cross. Think about that night when Jesus and his disciples were in the garden. Do you remember what happened? Can you put yourself there? That night he was praying, and the Pharisees and the leaders, they came with Judas leading them. What did Peter do? Do you remember? He took out a sword and he cut off the ear. I believe it was the high priest's slave or something like that. I need to go back and check. But he cut off an enemy's ear. And what did Jesus say? Put it away. Put that sword away. We don't need that. And then what did Jesus do? He reached across to the other side and he healed that man's ear. Today, Jesus is telling a different story. It's a parable. A parable about two men that go to pray. One is a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. Now, we've talked about these two groups before, but as in a way of reminding you, remember the Pharisees are really the good guys. Despite all the bad press they've gotten from Christian groups for the last 2,000 years, the Pharisees were really the good guys. These were the guys who followed the Old Testament law to the letter. If you had a neighbor, you wanted them to be a Pharisee. These were the good guys. They did it right. But they did their best to. Theologically, they were very similar to Jesus. The Pharisees believed in an afterlife. They believed in the resurrection of the dead, just as Jesus did. Now, the tax collectors, on the other hand, the tax collectors were the group that everybody loved to hate. These were the bad guys. These were the turncoats. These were the traitors. They were working for the Roman government, an oppressive government that had come in and taken them over. These guys were working for them, collecting taxes for them, and what's more, they weren't even honest about it. And the Roman government turned a blind eye, because they would take more than they were supposed to. And they got rich off of everyone else's oppression. They hated these tax collectors. But a Pharisee and a tax collector went to pray. The Pharisee marched into the synagogue or the temple, wherever it is that he went to pray. He went right up to the front. Thank you, God, that I am not like them. That I am not a sinner like those people over there. Adulterers, thieves, bandits, and especially not like that tax collector back there. The tax collector, he couldn't even come clear into the place of worship. And he kept his face down, and he beat his chest. God, forgive me. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Have mercy. Jesus said one of those two people went home justified. Here's a hint. It wasn't the Pharisee. Jesus said, whoever lifts themselves up will be brought down. Whoever lowers themselves will be lifted up. The tax collector was lifted up. He went home justified. Why? Why? Because when he went in to pray, when he went into that sanctuary, that holy place to pray, he found himself needing a connection to God. He knew that he needed God's love and God's grace and God's forgiveness and God's mercy in his life. He couldn't live without it. He needed that, and by showing his need for God, he made a connection with God and short-circuited that us versus them relationship. There was no more us, them. It was just him with God. And when you have that connection, you're related to everyone. You're all connected. When we admit our need, our desperate need for God's forgiveness and love and compassion and grace in our life, we connect ourselves to all. The Pharisee, on the other hand, he didn't need God's love or compassion or grace in his life. He could do it himself. He didn't need God's grace. He was focused on himself, but he didn't need forgiving. He was doing it all right, all by himself. And he did not seek a connection to God. He did not short-circuit that us versus them. It was still very much, look at me, how much better I am than those people over there. It is only by connecting with God, by admitting our need for forgiveness and grace and mercy, that we connect ourselves to God and connect ourselves to each other. This is what is so desperately needed. So desperately needed to short-circuit that tribalistic instinct that we all have. We all have, whether we admit it or not. We need it at a national level. We need it in our church. And we need it in our families. We need that connection to God and admitting that we need God and the connection with Him always. And we need God's forgiveness and God's grace. But what do I know? What do I know? I'm naive. I'm too simplistic. I'm just a country preacher. What do I know? But Jesus put it even more simply. Perhaps you know the words. If you're going to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye, what do you have to do first? take the log out of your own eye first. If you're going to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye, take that log out of your own eye first so you can see clearly. Jesus put it very simply. We need God. We need God in our lives. We need God's grace and God's compassion and God's mercy. It's only when we connect to God in that way that we can truly say, that we can truly ask God's kingdom to come, God's will to be done on earth as it is in heaven. But what do I know? I'm just a tired preacher.